Hey, good evening, Mizzou fans out there. Gabe, DeArmond, and Drew King coming at you live from Mizzou Arena after a 95-67 loss to Kansas that most certainly did not live up to the hype. We will get into that momentarily. We've done this after every football game this year. We're going to do it after a handful of basketball games. We're not doing it after every basketball game. We are going to do it for a handful of them. These are going to be sponsored by James Carlton Insurance, as many of our shows have been. And hey, guys, there's still some things going on in the arena, so understand there's going to be a little bit of background noise. This isn't a football stadium where we can go in a room and shut a door necessarily. But I want to thank James Carlton once again, 314-961-4800, carltoninsurance.net. You can get in touch with him. You saw firsthand what a top 10 basketball team looks like. James Carlton wants Missouri to have a top 10 basketball team. You do that through NIL these days. If you call James and you get an insurance quote from him and you mention this show, he is going to donate $20 for every one of those people to Mizzou's NIL collective. And let's be honest, that's the way you close the gap. Drew, just first impressions. Was this about anything more than just a big talent gap?
Honestly, I'm having a hard time saying no. I think, obviously it's a big moment for Mizzou to have this game here. I checked the attendance. It was a sellout crowd. They listed it at 15,000 people. But I don't think it wasn't the players living up necessarily to the moment. I think it was just that Kansas is, legitimately a top 10 team in the country, and Mizzou is not right now. And I don't know how far outside of the top 10 Mizzou is at this point, but it's not necessarily very close, right? It's 28 points away.
It's 28 points about, yeah.
Yeah.
So, look, I do think there's a talent gap. I think today was also about a little bit more than that, in that I think this was what happens when a top 10 team plays like a top 10 team, and whatever Missouri is doesn't play as well as they have been. Like, I don't think Missouri played well today, right? I think if Missouri plays 10 times, they're going to lose a few of them to this team by 28 points. They're not going to lose all of them by 28 points. But I thought the talent gap was accentuated by the fact that I just didn't think Missouri played well today.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. They had their worst assist to turnover ratio of the season so far, and that's something that they've really prided themselves on every game. And on top of that, they're shooting inside the arc, right? Their shots on 2-pointers, that was abysmal today, which has typically been like a strength of the team so far. And so it definitely was like out of character, kind of the way they were playing, the shots they were taking, the passes they were making. It just was all off for them. And maybe you're right. Maybe it did have something to do with kind of the hype coming into the game and knowing that everybody was going to be watching them. But again, I'll go back to, like, Kansas is just a really good team. They've beaten Duke already this season. And so I think that definitely played a big part in it as well.
I thought, I looked at halftime. It said Missouri was 8 of 16 on layups. I felt like Missouri was like 4 of 20 on layups.
Yeah, they missed a lot of bunnies.
It was so, like I said at halftime, the offense was not great, but it was mostly because they weren't shooting the ball well. They turned it over a little more than normal. But Drew, like, that defense, and here's what I think: if Missouri doesn't steal the ball from you out top, they're not a good defensive team. Is that fair to say?
I think so. I think one of the adjustments Dennis Gates tried to make, especially, thank you, Matt. But I think one of the adjustments Dennis Gates tried making was, rather than, having 3 or 4 guards on the floor, he put 3 forwards together, right? We saw Kobe and Aiden Shaw and Ronnie DeGray play together. I don't think we've seen that this year. And while that definitely helped defensively, it doesn't help very much offensively, right? Because I don't think any 3 of those guys can take a defender off the dribble, right? And so I thought that they did, step up a little bit defensively, especially in the second half after that big run that Kansas came out on. But I kind of agree with you. Mizzou's offense in the half court has not been great this season. And we saw that in the Wichita State game too. So if they don't get turnovers, I think that's kind of going to be their Achilles heel for this season.
Yeah, I do want to invite you guys. Obviously, a lot of you have figured it out. Put your comments and your questions in the queue. We'll do our best to catch up with them and kind of comment on what you guys want to talk about in this game, because we've had a decent amount of time to think about it. We spent most of the second half writing, to be honest. And Todd and Cam both made the same point. Seems like the environment was more of a detriment to Mizzou players, especially Hodge early on, than it was to Kansas. And I think that's fair to say. I don't think that was the difference in the game, but we talked about before the game, this atmosphere can get the home team going. It can also be a little too much. I mean, Kansas has guys, somebody asked DeJuan Harris in the postgame, what was this atmosphere? Did that have any impact on you? He said, I just played in a national title game with 70,000 people. No, Kansas doesn't have a ton of guys who have played in games like this, but even Kevin McCullough, he transferred from Texas Tech. He's played in games like this. Missouri, outside of Ronnie DeGray and Kobe Brown and whatever minutes they got in Lawrence, Kansas last year, they haven't played in a game like this, in a crowd like this. And look, I don't think it's the difference in the game, but I do think it's okay to say Missouri didn't handle it very well at the start, especially Demoy Hodge had trouble catching the ball. Trey Gomillion had 4 turnovers in the first few minutes. And, I mean, they had some shots, Drew, that they didn't just miss. I mean, they weren't close.
Yeah, and, it also stood out their shot selection was so much different than in games past, right? We saw one play where Sean East got the ball on the fast break, and he has Demoy Hodge a couple of steps ahead of him, and he doesn't give the ball up. He hangs on to it and takes a contested mid-range jumper from the elbow, right? That's not something that we typically saw from this team. And so, I agree. I think, you mentioned DeJuan Harris. On top of playing in the national championship game, he's from here, right? So he kind of knew what to expect. And Dennis Gates coming into this game said, well, we have experienced guys. We have players who have, played in games that were hostile.
Not like this.
It was not like this. Definitely not.
And look, it's not a disrespect to whatever games Noah Carter played at Northern Iowa or Demoy Hodge played at Cleveland State. It's just different, man. And Drew, we talked about it on the show on Wednesday. I said, you don't understand what it's going to be like. So this is the first time you've been in this atmosphere. Your initial impression, at tip-off is what of what this place is?
Yeah, I think the Antlers definitely brought it. I was really impressed by the student section. They immediately filled the end zone up. I liked some of the signs. Some of them were better than others, I feel like. But yeah, it's kind of loud in there, Gabe. I'm not gonna lie.
It was wild. Breakfast King brings up a good point, and this kind of sums it up. The defense has been awful all year. Of course, the top 10 team is going to tear it apart. So here's what you got today: a team that I don't think is very good defensively against a team that, when it's executing like that, is unbelievable offensively. Bill Self said it was the best they've played all year, and it's not close. And look, man, Bill Self and his guys ran a clinic on how to beat that defense. I mean, they just did. I don't know how else to put it.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that Bill Self was talking about how well they were handling kind of the help defense of Mizzou too, right? He was talking about how if we can avoid turning it over in the first 15 seconds of the game, we can find a good shot, right? We'll be able to slow down the tempo a little bit. And so when you saw, help defenders coming right after a Mizzou defender gets beat off the dribble, Kansas did a really good job of either making an extra pass or taking the open shot. And so I think that was a big difference for Mizzou in this game.
And I mean, DeJuan Harris, I don't know what his final stat line was, but we talked about on the show Wednesday. The concern here was if DeJuan Harris can get around his guy and get in the lane, this team had some pieces that could hurt you. And Self said they talked a lot about Missouri really picks up pressure high. They really come out and get you. And he said, if you can get past that first guy, then they're really going to help. So it's all about making the extra pass. And Kansas passed the ball beautifully. They did what Missouri's done a lot offensively this year. And they made everything. I mean, they made 10 straight shots at one point.
Yeah. So question for you, Gabe. Do you think that Mizzou was over aggressive with its pressure, right? Because I know that was something that we talked about coming into this game, that Mizzou had to do to get this win. And they definitely tried, but it seemed like Kansas was able to get past that back line pretty consistently.
I think Kansas handled this pretty well. I mean, if Missouri backs off and plays half-court game, they're not winning this game. So I think Missouri did what it had to do. The biggest problem was not only did Kansas make 10 straight shots, they didn't turn the ball over for the first 7.5 minutes of the game. I mean, and if Missouri can't get turnovers, they're not going to win this game. And they didn't. It was – I think they scored. I think Kansas scored 28 points off turnovers.
And not only that, that was going to be my point. Not only did Mizzou not get turnovers, but Kansas got turnovers, and Kansas scored on the fast break instead of Mizzou. I think that was a huge factor in this game because, Missouri, that's usually how Mizzou wins, right? And Kansas completely flipped the table on them. So, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kansas came in. Look, if Kansas was going to play an A game, Missouri probably wasn't going to win. And Kansas probably played an A game. Larry wants to know why Kobe Brown didn't play. Honestly, he wasn't good. I mean, Drew, I told you at halftime, I wouldn't play him in the second half. This team's best player can't not show up in this game.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
It wasn't because of foul trouble this time either, right? It was legitimately because he wasn't playing very well.
He was 1 for 5. He had 4 points and 6 rebounds and 3 turnovers.
Right. And, Bill Self did talk about how they wanted to take away Kobe going to his right. That was kind of part of their game plan going in. And they did a really good job of that today. It showed.
The disappointment, and this was something Gates said early on in the postgame. He said, look, in the paint, we've got to be better. And the disappointing part was this is not a big Kansas team. You looked at this matchup and said, Kobe Brown and Noah Carter could maybe get some things done, right? Because Kansas doesn't have a lot of big guys. They play pretty small. Okay. Well, Kobe Brown and Noah Carter got dominated. And Carter talked after the post game. He said, look, man, we got to be tougher. And that's definitely my fault. That's on me. KJ Adams had a huge game, went crazy. Their 6'7" guy looked their 6'7" guy looked like an all-star. Missouri's 6'7" guys just they didn't get anything done down low. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Michael's asking the question. I'm sure we've gotten this 100 times.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to put this one up, and we're going to tell you right now. We'll address it. It's Isaiah Mosley and the Doggins. Isaiah, I'm looking down at the court right now. He's one of a few players out there shooting the basketball. He was here. He appeared to be into the game. He did not play. We don't know what the situation is, guys. Dennis Gates was asked about it again after the game. He said, I anticipate Isaiah is going to help us. Everybody transitions at a different pace. The transition he's going through, he's going to come out the other side, and he's going to help us. I truly do understand the fan frustration with this because, Drew, I'm frustrated by it too because we look like idiots because we can't give anybody an answer, but we don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, all we know is it's not injury and it's not behavioral
related. And he played in the last game, so it's not like he's suspended. It's sometimes he plays and sometimes he doesn't, and we don't really know why.
Yeah, I mean, he was warming up tonight, and he had his headband on, he had his sneakers on, he looked like he was going to play. So we really just have no idea when he will actually see the floor.
And we're going to show up every game, and we're not going to know until that game starts.
Exactly. Definitely.
And I get that. I get that pisses you guys off, and you don't think that's a good enough answer, and your reaction is do your job. Look, guys, we can't pound the table and say, no, really tell us. He's going to tell us what he's going to tell us, and all we can do is ask. And, we've asked. We've asked 4 or 5 games in a row, and that's all there is to it.
Yep.
Let's see. Let's keep going. AU Stock says this Mizzou team had 3/4 of its players not playing Power 5 basketball last year. Yeah, I mean, yes. I totally agree. Kansas has a top 10 Power 5 roster. As Dennis Gates put it, they have championship DNA and residue.
Yep.
He said, Missouri, we're in our infant stages. It's disappointing because we had this, and I include me in this week. We had this built up into this, man, wouldn't it be cool if? And it just ended so quick.
Yeah. I mean, almost from the very beginning, you kind of realize, this is probably not going to be good for Mizzou tonight. But I don't even blame, us specifically, because like even, like Vegas had this as a 3.5 point game, and Ken Palm had this as a 3 point game. Like I feel like most people considered this would be a more competitive contest, right? And you could just tell from the start, like it's two teams on two different levels right now.
And I think there is something too, and I'm writing about this a little bit in my column. Bill Self has been in this building before. He's been in this rivalry before. He was not surprised by anything that he walked into. I promise he told his team all week, you're going to need your best game of the season to walk out of there with a win. Because Bill's 5-4 in this building before today. I think like he's had better teams than this one lose here. So I think he knows, and I think he probably had his guys. And I'm not saying Dennis Gates didn't get his guys prepared. That's not my point. Just you don't know till you're in it, and nobody here has seen this game before. And so, like, to ask them for it to mean as much to them as it meant to the 48-year-old couple sitting in section 107,
right?
It just was never going to, because they haven't grown up with this, and it hasn't been like in their family for generations. It's rivalries are a learned thing, and they might have learned something about it today, but they didn't know about it coming in.
Yeah, definitely not. Well, but even like the guys who played last year, like Kobe and Ronnie, like did you sense that there was any difference for them than the rest of the team?
I mean, I don't know, because I couldn't go to media day. I was on the injured list, so I didn't get to talk to anybody going into the game. So I don't know how they were handling it there. And obviously, we only talked to Nick and Noah after the game.
Right.
And look, like I think it's important to say that Gates said, "Hey guys, we're not happy with this. Like we're hurting. We know you. We know." Like Gates praised the crowd. He said, "We know how bad you wanted it, and we didn't give you enough." So it's all there. It's just. It's when you build up the morning of December 25th all year thinking you're getting an Xbox and your parents gave you boxers. Like they might be nice boxers, man. Like, your parents might have worked as hard as they could, and that's all they could afford for Christmas. But when you're 12 years old, opening boxers still sucks when you think you're getting an Xbox, and that's what happened today.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that was a really good analogy. I'm pretty proud of myself. So we're going to move on. Steven Steiner says, did this game lose the majority of the fan base? Drew, can you take this one, man? I can't do this. 10 games in.
I would say no, this game did not lose the majority of the fan base, especially like considering that they had built up enough trust with the community to have a sellout. And even knowing that this was Kansas, like I still expect there to be really big crowds when Kentucky comes through and when they get deeper into SEC
Arkansas.
Yeah, like these are still going to be some really big, high attendance numbers throughout the season. So I would say absolutely not. They did not lose the fan base off of this game.
If they lost you, that's a you problem. That's not a them problem. And look, I don't think, like I didn't watch that game and say they're not trying.
Right.
I didn't think they were. If anything, I thought maybe they were pressing a little too much early on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even looking past like the fan base, I don't think that this game is going to define like how good the team can be either, right? Like just because you lose 28 points to Kansas doesn't mean you can't be competitive with Kentucky and Arkansas or Illinois, right? You still have a chance in those games, right? So I think that we had to take this game as it is, which is, their first time playing one of the best teams in the country, right? And they didn't look great. Doesn't mean they can't get better.
This was always a 5-game stretch where 2 and 3 was going to be successful. Mm-hmm. If you can beat UCF and then just win one other one, and trust me, guys, I know how bad you wanted it to be this one. I get it. Because I have lived in this thing, and I do understand it the way you guys understand. So I get how badly you wanted it, but it just, this wasn't going to be the ones. Were you the only one, or was I the only one bothered by the lack of emotion shown by Gates? Look, this is Dennis, man. I mean, this is what you're going to get. He is a very even keel guy. I don't see him as a guy that's going to get a technical or blow his lid or come into a post game and rant and rave. Like I saw Brad Underwood said, after his team lost to Penn State today, he said they deserve to walk around campus and be miserable during finals week. Like, it's a great quote. I would love to write it. I don't think Dennis Gates is ever going to say something like that.
We couldn't even get
At
Gates.
Least not with this team.
We couldn't get Gates to tell us like what happened with the conversations where he was calling old coaches about this game. Like he wouldn't give us any details about that. He didn't want to tell us anything about what he thought about Kansas before the game. And then, like tonight, there's a couple questions where you can tell he really just doesn't want to answer. And so, yeah, it's tough to get into the mind of Dennis Gates for sure.
You are, I promise, like, look, guys, this might change in year 4 or 5 or something, but there's no way you're ever going to read a Dennis Gates quote and think, oh my God, that's unbelievable. Like, that's not him. He's not going to give that to us. Now, part of that is it's year 1. He doesn't know us yet, but I just don't get the feeling that's him. Carried by Dad says throwing full court passes that ended in turnovers every time was soul crushing. I will say there was a time with about 6 minutes left where Kobe Brown wound up to throw one of those 60-foot passes, and I just go, oh no, this is not going to work. And it did not work. I mean, and here's why. Kansas is faster than Penn or than Coastal Carolina, or like, this is different than the teams they've played.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to hit many Hail Mary touchdown passes against, a top 10 team in the country. Gabe, what was more soul crushing for you? Seeing those passes get picked off, or not being able to connect to the Wi-Fi during the game?
Oh, no, it was the Wi-Fi. Without question, it was the Wi-Fi. At one point, I pounded the table and scared the piss out of everybody else on press row. So it was unquestionably the Wi-Fi. Breakfast King says the bad news is this is a reality check going into conference play. Good news is most teams in the SEC aren't as good as Kansas. I mean, look, guys, Missouri's going to play 3 teams in the next month that I think are as good as Kansas. Illinois just beat Texas. Illinois is as good as Kansas. Now, are they every night? Will they be when Missouri plays them? I don't know. Kentucky's ceiling is as high as Kansas's. Arkansas's ceiling, I think, is the best team in America. Alabama just beat number 1 Houston at Houston. Like, you're going to play more teams like this than not over the next couple of months, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And, Dennis Gates got asked if this was kind of a litmus test for the team. And he actually disagreed. He said, the litmus test comes in practice for us, which is kind of coach speak for me. But
say what you got to say, right?
Yeah. But
it would have been a litmus test if they won.
Yeah, definitely. Right. And I think they still have, like I said, those chances against the bigger schools that are coming up on the schedule. Like I said on our podcast earlier this week, Gabe, if they beat one of those teams, I think it's a really good sign that this is a team with a lot of potential.
Yeah. Cam Cameron says, I've never seen a player favor his right hand more while being a left-handed shooter than Sean Easton. I don't know if that's true or not. I will say,
I don't know either.
I think at the end of the year, Sean will probably look back and say that was my worst. It was a tough day, man.
Yeah, it was tough for a lot of guys, though.
A lot of guys, right? Not just him. Yeah, no question. Stewart says this team is way better than Mizzou has had in years. We're losing a little bit of perspective. Like, no, today should not burn the fan base down. Missouri went to the NCAA tournament 2 years ago. 2 years ago, guys. Like, I get that it sounds good to say they've been garbage for 8 years, but there were a couple years in there where they weren't. This is one of 33. I just, like, I know we put more import on it because of who it was, but this is just one of 33.
Yeah, and that's kind of how you really do have to view it like that, right? Because you can't put all your stock into this one game and discount, the first 9 wins that Missouri had, right? Because they looked really good through those first couple of games. This is the first really good team they matched up with, but that doesn't mean that they can't compete at an NCAA tournament level, right? So,
I mean, today, I felt like today, look, had they won, I would have started talking about this being an NCAA tournament team. I hadn't before this, and based on today, I'm not going to. I'm not telling you it's impossible. Just what I know about this team is they've played 10 games. They've played 2 against teams that are anywhere in their area code talent-wise. They won one of them at Wichita State, and they lost. And really today, Kansas might not be in their area code, but what I'm saying is close or better, right? And they lost one. I mean, so they're 1-1 in games that you didn't go in knowing, hey, they should win this game.
Yeah, I agree.
I do kind of want to get like, I think we do need to touch on the fans and what they made this place into today, because it was everything that everybody wanted it to be. You know, I enjoyed it. And I know people get mad when I say I walk out of every Bill Self press conference kind of liking Bill Self, but somebody asked him what it was like to be back. He said, it was nice. The crowd was very welcoming. You know? But look, they brought it today, and I think it showed you what it can be. And like Gabe said, it's now up to the team to make it be that.
Yeah, it was definitely like everything that I was told it was going to be, right? It was probably up there in terms of like the crowds that I've been in covering a game. Like, it was very high up there. And I thought that, going back to the student section, I was really surprised to see how quickly they filled it up, because it was like the moment,
the second the doors opened.
Yeah, everybody was rushing in there. And then, on top of that, like, I didn't see very many people leave early, right? Like, I felt like the crowd stayed in the arena all the way to the end.
For the most part, I did walk up to use the restroom at the under 4 timeout, and there were a decent number of people leaving at that point because it was a 22-point game. But like, what impressed me was, like, this game realistically was kind of over with about 8 minutes left in the first half, right? But like, anything that they could grab onto, Missouri scored 5 straight to make it like a 15-point game with 14 minutes left or something. And man, you would have thought it was tied in the final. Like, that crowd tried to will them back in it. It wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, no, it was really, they were just into it from buzzer to buzzer. They were all the way invested. And like you said, they were willing it to happen. It just didn't happen tonight.
Right. And now, look, this is the story of Missouri basketball is, okay, it can be like this for Kansas. Can it be like this for Arkansas or Alabama or Florida or stuff? And now, I'm not saying it has to be this year. Like, the team has to give you a reason, right? But this game, this atmosphere showed what this place can be. It just hasn't been in a long time. And now, like Gabe said, hey, we got to give them more. We got to give them reasons.
Yeah, and you had to give them reasons on top of it being just a rival, right? Because I think Mizzou could have been 0-9, and they still might have pulled this kind of crowd, right?
Yeah, I agree. 9-0 helped, but yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So I agree. I think they have to give them even more reasons to keep showing up in this capacity.
Right. I mean, hey, you go, well, like, Kentucky's going to be weird because it's over Christmas break, so students probably aren't coming back. But I mean, if you were to go beat Illinois and you're coming back here 11-1, like, hey, that's going to be a pretty good crowd when Kentucky comes in. Steven says, I get frustrated with the playing time Golston and DeGray but after looking at the roster, I get it. Yeah, Drew, this was a thing to me. I'm like I found myself at halftime going, well, I wouldn't play that guy, and I wouldn't play that guy, and I wouldn't play that. Well, you got to play somebody, man.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't bench everybody,
Right. And it's also kind of how Dennis Gates just likes to run things, right? He wants to get a lot of guys out onto the floor. And at the pace that they play at, too, like, you have to keep guys fresh. They're going to tire out quickly if you leave them out there too long. So I kind of think that's also goes into it.
Is there anything you take out of this positively? Can you latch on to anything that happened today and say, I like this, or this is something to build on?
I thought they actually did a decent job on the boards, Gabe. I thought that Kansas did not manhandle them like other teams have. So I thought that was one positive. I thought Nick Honor, he hasn't had any really big games for them, but he's been consistent night to night. And so it doesn't, I said this in my kind of post-game thoughts, but whether they're playing SEMO or they're playing Kansas, like, what you're going to get from Nick Honor, right? Mm-hmm. He's been a very steady presence for them. So those were two of my main positives from this game.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a little harder time. The only positive I would take is I would think, like, you can't miss this many layups in the future. I think you can miss this many threes because I've seen them miss this many threes. I would like to see this team shoot fewer threes going forward. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot else, to be quite honest with you. Holy Shilt wants to know why Golston has an infinite green light. Look, this is how Dennis played. Like he has said, I will bench a guy for not taking a good shot.
Yeah.
If you're in the game, he expects you to shoot the ball. And again, like.
And Golston's had good games too. Like Golston had a 20-point game the other night.
I watched him play tonight, and I thought, well, like, hey, at least he's being aggressive. He's getting to the he's trying to make something happen. It didn't necessarily happen, but I can live with the guy making mistakes of aggression, right? What I don't want is passive, a guy that looks like he's intimidated by playing in this game. And there was some of that too, but I didn't think Golston looked intimidated. He just didn't shoot the ball very well.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, Breakfast King, obviously this team doesn't stack up with the top end of the SEC. How do you view them against the mid and low tier teams? Drew, maybe you're different than me. I'm not going to pretend to. I know Vanderbilt got slaughtered by Grambling last night. I think they're bad. But, like, I haven't watched Texas A&M or South Carolina play a minute. I have no idea at this point.
Yeah, I'm not for sure either. But, even with this loss, I'll still stick with kind of my preseason prediction that this is going to be a team that's on the NCAA bubble and is going to be somewhere kind of in the middle pack of the SEC. And I still haven't seen anything through the first 10 games that have changed my mind about that.
I think to do that, though, like, you're eventually going to have to beat somebody good. And I don't think Missouri's done that yet. I'm not saying they can't do it.
Right.
But I think today, like I wrote in some pregame stuff this morning, I said one of the things we could do after this game is look down and go, I know we kind of talked about the schedule being weak, but we didn't talk about it enough. Like it was very, very weak. And I think like that was a little bit of a part of tonight is the 9-0 was like, that's a little fake, right?
Yeah, sure. Definitely. I think it was ranked as like bottom 3 in the country by Ken Palm too. So, I mean, sure, 9-0 is probably not completely accurate of how good the team is, but again,
you just hope that 95-67 isn't indicative of
exactly. And so, yeah, I mean, they'll have chances to beat good teams this year, right? They've got a lot more chances. They'll play a lot of good teams this year. So, but yeah, look, it just wasn't tonight,
If they go over against top 15 teams, right? Like if they lose to Illinois and Kentucky twice and Arkansas twice, and they end the season, I don't know, 0-7 against top 15 teams, that's okay. That doesn't mean they can't have a good year. It means they probably won't make the NCAA tournament. But I'm going to be honest, man. That's never been my measuring stick here. Mm-hmm. They were 12-21 last year and basically told the whole roster, yo, we need better. Like, the goal to me was never beat Kansas and play in the NCAA tournament. I mean, maybe that was the goal, but not the expectation.
I mean, Dennis Gates' expectation is to win the national championship. So if we're going by that, then I think we're a ways off.
Right. And Todd brings up a good point. We're going to give up 90 a lot. Like, this team's going to be fun to watch, man, because they're going to be in a whole bunch of 92-88 games. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of what surprised me tonight was that they weren't able to, keep up the scoring that they have been so far this year. Kansas took away a lot from them in this game.
They did, and also Missouri just missed shots that, like, look, man, if you're going to beat a team like this, you got to make some of those. Not just the layups, but some of the open threes, too.
How about 8 missed free throws?
Yes, big. Big. That cost them $80 that they donate to some charity after the game. I didn't see which one.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. It was a bad day to have a bad day in the end, right? I guess that's how we sum it up. You never want it to happen against the team that you want to be your arch rival, and I think still is your arch rival in some ways. But rough day, and I guess now they get a week off for finals. They'll go to Florida and play UCF, and then they have another 5 days off after that, I think, before Illinois.
Yeah, they should be fresh in these games.
Yeah. Somebody asked Gates after the game, how do you keep the team's legs fresh? And I don't think he exactly phrased it right. I'm like,
no,
they haven't played in a week, and they don't play in another week. I think they'll be rested.
I think, yeah.
I think he meant, how do you keep them engaged,
right?
Not fresh.
Yeah,
but yeah. So
Gates was confused by that one too.
Yeah. Well, guys, I appreciate you joining us. We're, like I said, we're not going to do this after every basketball game. We're going to do it after some. We did it tonight. May do it after Kentucky or Arkansas. We'll pick some games here and there, kind of bigger games, to do it after. We'll probably not just the games against top 15 teams. I feel like we should pick one Missouri wins to do it after at some point, but did want to try this out on the basketball side. And so if you joined us here live, we'd appreciate you hitting the subscribe button, like the show before you leave. If you're listening on the podcast, which I'll put together after this, leave us a nice review, say good things, share it on social media. We'll do it a handful of times because that is what we've agreed to with our friend James Carlton State Farm Insurance. His information has been scrolling across the bottom of the screen there. CarltonInsurance.net, 314-961-4800. James, a big Mizzou fan. I'm sure he is having a rough night like some of you guys are out there. I get it. Pour yourself an adult beverage, wait for Drew and I to finish up our stories. Go back and forth with James on the message board about how frustrated you are. But James wants to make this better, and he wants to do it by helping Mizzou out in any way he can. The way he can is if you call him for an insurance quote. And look, you need insurance. Drew called him. He's Drew's insurance agent.
I'm a fan of James.
Yeah, Drew can vouch he's gonna do the best he can to save you money, and he's great to work with. He's also going to, if you call and get a quote, even if he doesn't end up being your insurance guy, if you just get a quote from him and mention Power Mizzou, he's going to donate $20 to Mizzou's NIL collective. So Drew's got some writing to do. I'm going to put up a podcast, cut some pictures. I got a little writing to do. So we'll wrap it up tonight on the boards. First time in 11 years against KU. Not the way you wanted it, guys. I get it, but back at it soon enough. So thanks for watching. We'll catch up with you later.